Welcome back to r/JustNoHOA, where people share stories about their crazy homeowner associations that make us feel better about not living in an HOA. And in case you are new around here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join our awesome community. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one was posted by user Meyerwood on our own subreddit r/ripe stories, and it is titled "Petty Revenge Transforms an HOA and Causes a Property Manager to Get Fired." I live on the west coast of Canada and we don't have HOAs in my province, like a state. However, we do have strators, which are essentially the same thing. By the way, please forgive me if I pronounce strators incorrectly. Anyway, a building strata is a duplex or condominium building where units inside the building are individually owned, but a strata corporation is formed to take care of the common property assets, in other words hallways, parking lots, roofs, etc. Most have property managers who take care of arranging maintenance contractors, vehicle towing, garbage disposal, etc. A bareland strata is a little different and looks like a typical single-family neighborhood. So, ripe stars, as far as I can tell, a bareland strata in Canada is pretty much similar to a normal HOA in America. The units are the individual strata lots, and the common property would typically consist of the strata road, which may look like a public road, streetlights, underground water, sewer infrastructure, and common amenity areas like clubhouses, gardens, etc. Most have property managers as well. Of the two types of stratas, bareland stratas are often the ones that have more issues, as property owners may assume that their common assets, for example the road, are owned by the city and they don't maintain them, which leads to failure of common property infrastructure. There are a few recent cases where a bareland strata never invested any money in maintaining their underground sewer/water infrastructure, and it failed, costing each owner upwards of $25,000. And by the way, if OP is talking about Canadian dollars, that would equal around 19,000 American dollars. Anyway, they often demand that the local government use taxpayer dollars to bail them out, but 9 times out of 10, this tactic does not work. The background: I worked in local government when I was younger and dealt with my fair share of bareland strata corporations, demanding that the government enforce the strata rules or take over their infrastructure. Once I had saved enough money to buy a home, I was determined not to live in a bareland strata. Unfortunately, I could only afford a condo, so I had to buy into a building strata. It was a little quirky. The original property was one large lot that was developed into 4 condos with a shared driveway and common fountain/sitting area. In my opinion, the city should have required that each building be on the same strata plan, but they didn't, so pieces of the driveway were owned by different buildings and there were legal easements to allow the other building to use the driveway. I was in building D, see the sketch, which was landlocked and needed access through building B and A's land to get to the public road. While there was a legal easement, enforcing the easement would have to be done through the courts if relations between building stratas went sour. And guys, here you can see the sketch that OP provided us with. Maybe you can pause the video here and take a quick look. Anyway, this is a rough site plan, not to scale. The blue area is a garden for sitting and smoking. My observations: my unit had a prime view of the parking lot, which only had 4 visitor parking stalls. In my first week, I noticed that folks from building A, B and C were using our visitor stalls, meaning that family and friends couldn't visit me or the other occupants of my building who owned this portion of the parking lot. I had been told by occupants of buildings A, B and C that there was a zero-tolerance policy if my guests parked on their land. So I was a little annoyed when my friends could not visit and I reached out to the property manager. The property manager advised that the management company does not enforce parking. The parking guy who did was a volunteer and has moved away. Onto the setup, there is me, douchebag drivers DD, the strata council and the property manager. When I moved in, I was going to have a friend over who was surprising me with a housewarming gift. This was going to be a challenge as there were only 4 visitor spots shared between the 36 units in our building. Also, due to the landlocked status of my building, some people had trouble finding the entrance between building A and B. My friend called me and was having trouble finding the driveway, so I went out to meet them. On my way to the road, I saw that each of the visitor stalls was full. But the folks, douchebag drivers who just parked in the last available spot, were headed towards building A. I got their attention, pointed to the sign "Parking for building D only" and asked if they could move because I had company on the way. They told me to F off and walked away. Well, ripe stars, talk about nice neighbors, at least they say what they think. Anyway, my friend was able to find parking a block away and walk to my building to visit, but I was a little annoyed and called up the property manager to see if they could deal with the DDs. He informed me that only the straighter president can authorize a tow and he is out of town, so I was out of luck. And now on to the story. I decided to attend the Straighter Council meeting to see if I could get a copy of the bylaws and to get an idea of how the council functioned. Property manager: since the parking guy, also a council member, has moved, we don't have enough council members to hold a meeting. Straighter Council, 2 ladies: who is the new guy? If he is an owner, he can be on the council, and then we have enough people to hold a meeting. Property manager looks to me: are you an owner? Me: yes. Property manager: great, you're the vice president of the council now. Let's get this meeting started. Me, confused: okay. The meeting was a little bit dull. It was focused on finances and addressing complaints received by different unit owners, mostly about noise and parking. Since I identified myself as the guy who asked about the parking issue, afterwards the property manager gave me the parking notices and a copy of the bylaws. I was instructed to leave a warning on a windshield if there is any overnight parking and call the president for a tow the next time they parked. After the meeting, I went back to my unit and looked at the rules and bylaws. While we could tow the folks using our stalls and clearly visiting other buildings, the rules around how long legitimate visitors could stay were unclear, and it didn't appear to prohibit owners from parking their second vehicles in the visitor stalls. However, the straighter president had been towing for these offenses. The next week, the DDs, douchebag drivers, were back and once again used our parking area when visiting the other buildings. Me places the warning on their windshield. DDs: what the F are you doing? Me: you cannot park here unless you are visiting someone from our building and there's only 4 stalls to share between the 36 unit owners and you have taken the last one. DDs: yeah, what are you going to do about it then? Me: well, the straighter president made tow now that we have given you the warning. DDs laughed and walked away. When I sent the photo of the car and license plate to the straighter president, he informed me that he knows the DDs and not to give them a hard time. I called up the property manager who reiterated that only the straighter president can authorize a tow. This was complete nonsense as the bylaws and rules did not state this, but I held my tongue and formulated a plan. Several months later, the annual general meeting was held and the straighter president was not present. Apparently he had sold his place but kept his title until the meeting as no one wanted to do his job. I put my name forward for president and was voted in unanimously by the residents, mostly because no one else wanted the job. Sure enough, the DDs were back within a week, once again parking in the visitor stalls. Me places the warning on their windshield. DDs: that's a waste of paper, we're not going to get towed. Me: if you leave this car and go to one of the other buildings, the straighter president is going to call for a tow. DDs: huh, whatever man. Walked away. I waited about 15 minutes and then called for a tow. DDs had to call a cab and never came back. Now that my petty revenge was complete, I decided to look into the straighter rules and bylaws and see what sort of fixes were needed. While the rules stated that legitimate visitors and owners who abuse the straighter visitors' parking were in contravention of the bylaw did not explain what an abuse was, and it was wide open for interpretation. I knew that if I called to tow any vehicle, I would be liable if there was a court dispute and not the property management company who should have been managing the parking as it was in their contract. Generally speaking, in the case of a dispute, a judge would determine the interpretation, and they often don't find in favor of straighters, but the courts do look at if enforcement has been consistent. Example, if we have a log of every time this car broke the rules, we have records of placing warnings and notes about what we considered a violation, we might get a favorable ruling from a judge. Unfortunately, the notices were vaguely written and the property manager did not have this information as, according to him, only the straighter president can authorize a tow. I'm not the president, I'm just a property manager. I brought my concerns to the property manager and suggested that we change the rules to cover off our liability and ensure fairness and consistency to the parking issue. Property manager: "What's the matter?" Me: "I'm not comfortable enforcing the parking rules. Our rules are not clear." Property manager: "Those are the rules. You have volunteered to help." Me: "We should change the rules then." Property manager: "That's going to take a lot of work. Just enforce the rules as they are written." Later that night, the property manager sent me a follow-up email explaining that my role was to hand out parking notices and not to challenge the rules and bylaws. Cue malicious compliance, I decided that I would rewrite the parking notices to read something along the lines of: "Notice: it is suspected that this vehicle is parking in violation with the straighter bylaws. Your license number is XYZ, has been recorded and will be towed by property management company. If you think this notice was issued in error, please reach out to property manager's email." I gave any vehicle parking overnight a notice but never called for a tow. Within a month, I caused 80+ calls to the property management company with complaints and concerns. Property manager: "What's going on? Why am I getting all these calls?" Me: "I've been handing out notices. It's my role." Property manager: "You should call the tow company if we have repeat offenders." Me: "Sorry, that's not my role. My role is to hand out notices." Property manager: "What? No, you need to tow. Who told you that you just do notices?" Me sends screenshot from property manager noting that my role was to hand out parking notices and follow the rules as they are written. Property manager hangs up the phone. The property manager realized that I would never call a tow truck. Ironically, making the notices threatening versus vague caused many of the folks from other buildings to stop using our parking lot because they believed the threat. Word got around that I was to thank for this and people were grateful. At our first council meeting, 3 months after the annual general meeting, I welcomed the new council and started the meeting. Prior to the meeting, I had gone through the straighter's contract with the property management company and found a few interesting tidbits of information. Property manager: "I'm happy to go over the annual budget. Before I do, does anyone have topics for tonight?" Me: "I would like to go through these." Drops binder on the table. Property manager, visibly confused: "What are those?" Me: "These are our bylaws and rules and frankly, they are out of date and vague." Property manager: "I think that's a little harsh. The rules are fine." Me drops a second binder on the table. Property manager, visibly more confused: "What are those?" Me: "I have spoken to every unit owner to see if they understand our bylaws. They don't, and the interpretation of our bylaws is all over the board." Property manager: "It cannot be that bad. Give me an example." Me: "Well, parking is an issue, and our bylaws say you cannot abuse the visitor parking stalls, but some residents think that abuse is anything more than 30 minutes, 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days, a weekend, a week, etc. We could find ourselves in deep trouble if the property management company starts towing." Property manager: "Only the straighter president can authorize a tow." Me hands out paper. "Actually, your contract says that you will take care of the parking enforcement." Also holds up phone. "Here is a screenshot from you clearly noting that my role is to hand out parking notices and to follow the rules as they are written. Nowhere in our rules does it say that only the straighter president can authorize a tow. If you are not going to fulfill your contract, we should find another property management company." Property manager, visibly panicked:
Okay, we will take over parking enforcement. We don't need to change the bylaws for that, do we?
Me? Yes, we do. If you tow and we lose in court, the straighter has to cover your court fees.
Property manager, fine, we will update the parking rules.
Me? No, we have to redo the entire bylaws. Here's some other rules that are out of date, which none of the residents agree on the interpretation. We continued to walk through the bylaws line by line, and everyone realized how archaic they were. Property manager,
okay, you've made your point. These bylaws need to be updated. We can hire a lawyer to draft the new bylaws, but that's going to take some time and we will need to approve at least $10,000 to allow for the lawyers to draft the bylaws. And also account for revisions if the owners want changes. This will also have to wait until the next annual general meeting.
Me drops a third binder on the table. Property manager, no longer visibly confused, just looks like he has a headache.
What are those?
Me? I have actually gone and drafted a new set of bylaws to replace these garbage ones. If you go through the residents' comments in the second binder, you will see that there is some common ground on what people do think would be reasonable if we had an opportunity to change the rules. These draft bylaws addresses all those comments. Property manager,
okay, we should still budget around $8,000 then.
Me? No, it should not cost us a dime. Your contract with our straighter says that your company will provide legal services in the form of vetting new rules and conducting bylaw reviews and updates on a 5-year basis, and this is covered in our monthly fees. When was the last time a review was undertaken? Property manager,
I'm not sure. I will need to look at our records.
Me? Well, the bylaws are from 2006 and our contact with you started in 2007. Property manager looking defeated.
Okay, we can conduct the bylaw review in 3 months so that the new bylaw is ready for the next annual general meeting. I want to move on with the review of our annual budget and move on. Does the president have anything else to add before I do?
I had expected this. Part of the contract with the property management company included a clause that the company could, with a month's notice, cancel their contract with no penalty provided that they complete any works currently directed by the council, provided that the work could reasonably be done within that month. I imagined that this clause was in place so that if anyone ever attempted to take advantage of the legal services, the management company could withdraw their services and claim that since the bylaw reviews were scheduled in 3 months and therefore could not be reasonably reviewed within the 1-month period. Me? Before we move on, I think we should adopt these new bylaws as rules. This will allow us to enforce parking problems right away, and the legal review of the rules can be done within a few weeks. Property manager panicking,
we cannot do that. Rules are different from bylaws.
If you read the Strata Project Act, the main difference between rules and bylaws are the fines you can apply to them. Also, the rules have to be voted on at the next AGM, so this is a good opportunity to test them out while also getting that legal review. Straighter Council, 2 ladies, we like that idea, let's vote. We got the legal review completed by the management company within a few weeks, and they were later adopted as bylaws at the annual general meeting. The 2 ladies who had been on the Straighter Council since 2007 realized that they hadn't been getting the best value for the contact with the property manager and put forward a motion to end our contact and hire the property management company who deals with the other buildings in our area who had a much better reputation. And thank you very much user Meyerwood91 for posting this interesting sort of HOA story from Canada. And Ripe Stars, I would like to encourage you, if you live inside the US, but also if you live outside the US, if you have something like HOAs in your country, please feel free to send me any interesting stories or even maybe articles, at least if they are in English, either on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit, or send them to me via email. My email you can find on my channel's About page if you're on PC, or you can send me an email to ripereddit@gmail.com. Since we all love HOA stories, any interesting articles or stories are very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And the last one is titled IRS Revenge.
Backstory: I've been fighting the IRS for a year now because a previous employer did not file a completed income statement in 2018 after they got hit by the IRS and submitted the missed income statements, and suddenly the IRS comes after me and tells me I owe $479 in back taxes. I cannot go back and retroactively file it, so I owe the full amount despite the fact that the amount owed would have been covered under what I already paid if I could file it under the appropriate return. The petty revenge: after receiving notice that they were threatening to seize my bank accounts until payment was made, I finally relented and went online to pay. Well, they have a payment plan option, and because the amount owed in income put me well below the poverty line, I could make whatever payments I wanted until it was paid. So I opened a new bank account, put the $479 in it, and set the payments for $1 for the next 479 months. The amount they get charged to initiate an automatic withdrawal is well above this amount, so for the next nearly 40 years they will pay to take that money from me. I feel better about the payment now. Edit: I'm sorry, I cannot respond to all the posts on here, but I would like to address a couple of the major themes. Number 1, I claim to know nothing about taxes, tax law, or IRS protocol. The amount of BS calling is due solely due to my ignorance on the matter, rather than an attempt to concoct a fake story for fake internet points. I waited on hold for 3 hours to talk to someone at the IRS who told me that the payment had to be made. I assumed that the people at H&R Block knew what they were talking about when they said it could not be amended. As for the assertions that the IRS does not bother with amounts so low, I have a certified hand-delivered Levi letter that disputes that. Number 2, as for the account, this is petty revenge. I will gladly pay the additional interest, a nominal amount, to keep the account open and avoid the account being closed for inactivity. Admittedly, I will eventually close it off and pay the remaining amount when I get tired of the upkeep. Also, I don't mind paying an additional amount of interest into the account to ensure that they receive only $1 a month from me. Hope it is worth all the trouble to pull it out and process it. Also, number 3, I will not be seeking a lawsuit against a former employer. That's a waste of time and would cost far more than it would be worth even if it was successful. In addition, I took out W9, evidently that is not correct for an employee. My apologies for the misunderstanding. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.